real debate, not just saying shame.
The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Ms Lauder.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. I'm pleased to talk to this important motion brought forward by my colleague Mr Parton today in relation to information gained under an FOI request. And FOIs are very important. They give us the information that we're entitled to, if you like. A democratic government should be run for and by the people, not just those in the elected office. You have machinery like FOI working in the background to ensure that information is made available to the public, to ensure accountability, to make sure that people in any type of public office cannot abuse their power because they have the knowledge that their actions could come into the public eye. FOI keeps citizens in the know about what's going on in their government. It allows individuals to see what information government holds and to seek correction of that information if they consider it wrong or misleading. And I'm not talking about personal information here because there is very clearly set out in the FOI legislation the instances where personal information shouldn't be included. But FOI enhances the transparency of policy making, of administrative decision making and government service delivery, and that's why it's important. A community that's better informed can participate more effectively in the democratic process. And information gathered by the government at public expense is, in effect, a public resource. It should be available more widely to the public. The information that's held by the government is a very powerful tool, and we must all be held accountable for our actions and ensure that we have transparency of information. The recent example where the Leader of the Opposition put in an FOI request about the use of CFZ zones for potential public housing came back very heavily redacted. In some cases, the information was barely understandable or legible or able to be read. It begs the question as to why perhaps it wasn't just denied in the first place. But I'd like to go back to the object of the Freedom of Information Act. The object of the Act is to extend as far as possible the right of the Australian community, and in particular the citizens of the Territory, to access to information in the possession of the Territory by A, making available to the public information about the operations of agencies and, in particular, ensuring that rules and practices affecting members of the public in their dealings with agencies are readily available to persons affected by those rules and practices, and B, creating a general right of access to information in documentary form in the possession of ministers and agencies, limited only by exceptions and exemptions necessary for the protection of essential public interests and the private and business affairs of persons in respect of whom information is collected and held by these agencies. So the object of the Act quite clearly sets out that the things affecting members of the public should be readily available to the persons affected by those rules and practices. That's reading directly from the objects of the Act, Madam Assistant Speaker. Last sitting period, back in May, we had a debate on a similar and related topic about the use of community facility zones, and we talked about the fact that CFZ zones are vital for the community. They're designed, according to the zoning, to be used for things like places of worship, childcare centres, libraries, outdoor recreation facilities, green spaces. People want and expect to have these types of facilities close to them, and that's one of the benefits of living in such a lovely place such as Canberra, is that many of us are lucky enough to have those spaces close to us, or we're aware that there's a space nearby zoned for community facilities. So we have a potential enjoyment, a future enjoyment of those CFZ zones. In this instance, as we discussed last sitting, it appears the government is taking those zones away for what, in effect, is a residential purpose. The sad part is that our public housing tenants also have the expectation of access to those community facility type zones, and they're being taken away from everyone in that community. But that brings me back to the point that those opposite are trying hard to make this an argument about opposition to public housing, and that is not what this is about. It demonstrates, if you like, the paucity of their argument, the fact they're unable to back up what they're saying by this name-calling back across the chamber, saying that we're anti-public housing. And we've all heard from many people in this place their own personal experiences with public housing. Ms Berry just not long ago talked about the fact that most Canberrans are in favour of public housing in their suburb. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But it's not about public housing in our suburb, this particular argument. This is about taking away potential community facilities, and it's about transparency and accountability of the government to the public. So the motion that we have today calls on the government to provide the Assembly with details of all the community facility zone land that's been considered for or has been earmarked for development of public housing. This is information that's readily available. And I take the point in the amendment moved by Ms Berry that the government doesn't direct government departments what to release in FOI requests. But the government can still release this information if they so choose. There's a reference in the amendment circulated by Ms Berry about factors that serve as a basis for redacting information as clearly set out in the FOI Act. And I can read out some of those bases for exempt documents. It includes documents exempt under the Commonwealth Act, documents affecting relations with Commonwealth and states, executive documents, internal working documents, documents affecting enforcement of the law and protection of public safety, document affecting national security, defence or international relations, documents to which secrecy provisions of enactments apply, documents affecting financial or property interests of the Territory, documents concerning certain operations of agencies, documents affecting personal privacy, documents subject to legal professional privilege, documents relating to business affairs, etc., documents affecting economy, documents containing material obtained in confidence, documents disclosure of which would be contempt of the Legislative Assembly or a court, certain documents arising out of companies and securities legislation, and electoral rolls and related documents. At a very simplistic reading, it wouldn't appear that providing this information would contravene any of those exempt documents. In fact, at some point of time, the information about location of these planned facilities will become in the public domain when a DA process and a consultation process takes place. So obviously there's a point in which time it will be in the public domain anyway. So to facilitate the conversation, which in fact was referred to in those documents, one of the points that was not redacted was the Public Housing Task Force minutes, where it itself referred to the fact that consultation will be required because of expected community outcry about these proposals. So it's already there in the public domain. So why can't we have this conversation? Why can't we provide the information to the public to start that discussion?
Get to you before lunch.
It's because the government's hiding behind a veil of secrecy. It's time for the government to lift that veil of secrecy. It's vital to the confidence of the community, a community that's fed up with that secrecy that's going on with this government. I believe the government should make their public aware of the intention for the use of CSZ land. They need to be open and accountable and make the public aware of the information that was redacted about which community facility zone pieces of land are going to be used for housing. And the government needs to support the FOI Act and make available to the public information about the operations of agencies, as is quite